Marketer of the day, number 454. Whoa, wow, yes. Get out of your own way and just listen to become a mesmerizing, purposeful, agendaless influencer with Dr. Mark Goulston. Hey everyone, and thanks for listening. We're talking right now with Dr. Mark Goulston, and Dr. Mark is one of the world's foremost experts on empathic listening and how you can use that to increase your influence, your marketing, and get through to anyone. He's the author of 7 books, and his book, Just Listen, is the top book on listening in the world. Dr. Mark provides workshops, one-on-one coaching, and consulting and keynotes around the world. His websites are markgoulston.com and goulstongroup.com, and today he joins us to tell us the secret formula that Elon Musk and Steve Jobs followed to create fanatical customers, clients, and investors. Sounds like fun stuff. How are things, Dr. Mark?
No, things are exciting. In fact, my book, Just Listen, became a bestseller in Russia. And about a month ago, I gave a one-day training in Moscow to the Russian Federation in listening and empathy. And it was a home run. I'll send you a link to the video highlight reel. And what was interesting is I had them at hello because I tuned into where they were coming from. And literally, they stayed awake for 6 hours. They bought VIP plates to have dinner with me at $1,600 American dollars. It was crazy. But here's the formula, and then we'll get into the formula that Elon Musk and Steve Jobs use and everybody else can use. Is when you really get where people are coming from and you get where they want to go, and in this day and age where everybody is just selling too much to each other, and if you help them get wherever they want to go without asking anything in return, what happens is people who are hesitant to trust, when they see you have no agenda, and that's what I said in Moscow, I said, they're paying me well. I am only here to help you get where you want to go, and I live to be of service. I'm not here to sell you anything. I'm not here to convince you of anything. I'm here to help you connect better with everybody in your company, your customers, and the people in your lives, and I delivered on that. And so I'm really on a good roll because what's happening is I live by that. And I'm running into some top CEOs, like Fortune 50 CEOs. And when you don't have an agenda other than to give them value, some of these people are generous and they hate not being able to come from their generosity, and they are guarded about it because everybody's hitting on them. So I've developed relationships with these, like top CEOs around the world because they don't smell an agenda. So it's
Right.
Fascinating.
Yeah,
But
it is when they don't have to look at everything that you say through the lens of what's his ulterior motive or what's he looking to get out of me. You're just being generous, and then you can kind of play off their need to do the reciprocity back to you.
yeah, absolutely. And so that we can deliver on the promise you made at the beginning, the 4-step unconscious formula that Steve Jobs followed and Elon Musk followed, but they didn't know they followed it. The 4-step formula is, how do you create gotta have it? If you go to goulstongroup.com, one of my websites, our tagline is, we create gotta have it. And when you create gotta have it, you don't have to sell anyone anything. They say, I gotta have it. The people lined up around the Apple stores to get the iPhone X, what are they thinking? I gotta have it. And the basis of creating gotta have it, and people should be writing this down or they can listen to it again, it's simply this. You cause people to go, whoa, W-H-O-A, wow, W-O-W, H-M-M-M, yes. And how those work. And I toured as Steve Jobs last year. I did a one-man show called Steve Jobs Returns from the Dead. If you go to YouTube, you'll see some video clips. And I played Steve Jobs coming back to Apple from 97 to 2007. And the cornerstone of the whole thing, and I showed a video clip of Steve Jobs, a dramatization of Steve Jobs going to Xerox PARC and discovering the graphical user interface. And if you look at this dramatization, it was under American Genius, National Geographic. There's a 2-minute segment. When he's there and he looks at the graphical user interface, the mouse and the icons, you look in his eyes and he goes, whoa, I can't believe what I'm seeing. So whoa is I can't believe what I'm seeing, hearing, reading, or feeling. Wow that's astonishing, amazing, unbelievable. That's too good to ignore. That's too good not to use. And you're thinking about it, that's and then, yes, I see where we can use it, sold. And when you look at that clip, you can, I'm picturing it right now in my eyes, you will see those 4 steps where he goes, whoa, he goes, wow. In the clip, he looks at Wozniak, and Wozniak says, once they go to the mouse and icons, they'll never go back. And then the end of the clip is, and Steve Jobs returned to Apple to do something that Xerox could never do, and he created the Macintosh. So if you're listening, if you're marketing materials, whether it's on mobile, whether it's on your website, whatever people are seeing, reading, hearing about you, if you don't create whoa, wow, yes, you're creating nah, no thanks, never mind. And I want to demonstrate it because, and you will love telling me this. You had a whoa, wow, yes, when you decided to start a podcast. So what was your whoa, wow, yes?
All 4 kind of putting me on the spot here.
Well, whoa, so something you noticed something that, or there was an opportunity and you saw an angle on it. So what was that?
I mean, I would say that the woe was I saw that there were other podcasters out there, and they were cranking out a lot of episodes, and I myself subscribed to a few of them, and I thought to myself, well, now that I'm subscribing to a lot of these podcasts, this is something that's useful. This is something that's new, and it piqued my interest as far as if I could do something similar.
So the woe was they actually had a call to action, and I took the plunge and I started subscribing. So I intuitively knew, wow, if they could get me to take action to subscribe to them, there's a market there if I could provide similar content that was compelling and grabbing, and then I would get people to subscribe to me.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, and then wow was probably, you said, these podcasts, this thing is growing. It's the wild, wild west. There'll be some winners, some losers. I'm pretty smart. I'm quick on my feet. I let people who write books on listening talk the whole time. And I could really do this. And then you put together the necessary infrastructure, the studio, the Yeti, whatever microphone you're using,
Yeah,
or Skype. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean the WoW, I would say like I kind of became dialed into 1 or 2 podcast hosts. I have a friend named Ray Edwards, and I started listening to his show, and I noticed that he had like different segments and different music, and he put ads in it, and so it went from just this kind of cloudy idea of I could have a podcast into I like the format of this guy's podcast. I like some of the things he's doing. Now I can more clearly see not only the pieces that connect it, but also the cool things I can get out of it.
Yeah, so that was your big And when did you decide to pull the trigger and go with it?
When I
Yes.
pulled the trigger, I already I was doing a little bit of the podcasting, but when I began serious, when I moved it to an interview format like we're in here, my business partner just started cranking them out. And I saw that his iTunes ranking went up to like, I think number 4 in marketing and management. And I saw he had his calendar just full of all these interviews. And I was thinking, okay, well, now here's a podcast on steroids. I've seen the podcast idea in general. I've seen a podcast I like. I've seen podcasters that do great, but here's something that's really like powerful and unique. Got to have it. Got to do it.
Yeah, and so exactly. And so you also build relationships with people like me. And so if this is a decent podcast, it gets archived on your site. I put links on it to my site. You build community, you build relationships. So it's a win-win-win all around, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
It's interesting. I have a podcast that I started a few months ago, and it's steadily growing. And also, if you're listening, if you're into marketing, you're a CEO, uh, keep this in mind. People don't remember better than, they remember different than.
I like it.
And that's why a lot of times people are trying to outrageous each other because the more outrageous you are, but what's happening though is being more outrageous is just better than the last outrageous. It's not different than. And I had a whoa, wow, yes, to come up with the idea for my podcast, which is growing steadily. And I think entrepreneur.com had a recent article rated 10 podcasts you must listen to, and it was number one. It was an article. And my podcast is Prison Letters with Dr. Mark Goulston. So I used to be a practicing psychiatrist, suicide specialist, hostage negotiation trainer, done a lot of things. But my first book, Get Out of Your Own Way, which has been in the top 10 self-help books at Amazon for the last 10 years, it's found its way into prisons and jails. And over the last 22 years, I've gotten a couple hundred letters from inmates, reaching out for help about how they're messed up. And so I've responded to some of them, but what I do on the Prison Letters podcast, which is at iTunes, Stitcher, I think the FM channel, is I'll read one letter for each podcast, and then I just go into the mind of the person who's writing to me. So I get into what makes up a criminal mind, and they're all reaching out for help because my book, Get Out of Your Own Way, has very short 3 to 4 page chapters on self-defeating behaviors. And they're all identifying, this is where I've screwed myself up. And of course, since they're in prison, it's the similar chapters, not learning from my mistakes, getting angry, making things worse, getting involved with the wrong people. So that they probably pick the same 6 chapters. And then I kind of riff on it during the episode. And I'm very meandering. I'm probably meandering here a little bit, but hopefully people grab some nuggets here and there. But the whoa, wow, yes, and why the podcast production company, Great Love Media, who produces me, and they also produce a podcast by Tatum O'Neal, the Oscar-winning actress, and they just did a feature story on her and her podcast in the New York Times in the last couple of weeks. So she's blown up, and she's taken me along with her because she plugs me on her podcast. But the whoa, wow, yes thing is, wow, this guy is reading a letter from someone in prison, and then he's going in, just like I went into the mind of Steve Jobs for the whoa, wow, yes. With each of the podcast episodes, I go into the mind of the criminal and what made them do what they did, and then I imagine their childhoods, and I imagine how they're having trouble getting over it. One of the favorite episodes is I think it's called Not Born to Hate, and I read a letter of someone who had all this anger, and then I kind of go into a trance, and after I read the letter, I don't know what happened to me, but I suddenly imagined that this person didn't hate all his life, and so I imagined being born as a newborn. I mean, literally, I said, geez, I was just born, and a couple hours ago, everything was hunky-dory, and I think I'm in a cold place, and I hear people yelling. Wow, I didn't ask to be born. And these people are yelling. What's that about? And then I imagine it's a few months later, and I'm laying eyes on my mother for the first time, and I said, oh, here's my mom. What's she saying to me? And she's yelling at me. What's she saying? Can you put the nipple in your mouth? Well, stop putting it in my eye, for crying out loud, And, oh, that must be my dad behind her. What's she saying to him? Can you wake up in the middle of the night and feed this thing instead of just, lying there like a beached whale? Geez, I'm thinking, I'm born to this? Wow. So that was a crazy episode, but they're all sort of like that.
And so, what I'm hearing from a lot of what you do in your thought process is that there seems to be a lot of like an inciting incident. Like you don't just go and make some content and you say, well, today I'm going to talk about this concept. Just start with like this letter that someone wrote in, or even in our conversation here today, like with podcasting, I did 100 episodes myself, but after a while I found myself kind of struggling for content, and I noticed that even before moving to the interview format like we're on here, the podcast episodes that seem to be the most well received and the most fun for me were ones where I was reacting to something that happened out in the real world. Like if I'd seen something happening, or I had to speak up about something, or something bothered me a little bit, or I saw a mistake being made. It was always something that happened from seeing or watching or talking to other people, as opposed to just coming up with some new idea. It seemed like by using someone else as some kind of catalyst, there's more material there, as opposed to just throwing out an idea or a concept or something.
Well, exactly. But let me ask you, when you would do that, did you have it all plotted out, what you would say in the podcast, or you would just spontaneously, you had an idea of what was going on, and then you just spontaneously kind of riff on it?
I'd have maybe a couple bullet points, but it was mostly spontaneous.
Well, see, that's what I think draws people. I think what happened in Russia is, I spoke for 6 hours. But what happened is I was continually responding to the audience. I could feel where they were at, and something spontaneously would come up that they'd want to hear from me. And so I think when you're there making sense for yourself of something that you want to understand better, at the moment you're very articulate, and so when you get clear about something in your mind, people go on the journey with you. So you're not just explaining something, they're experiencing you discovering something brand new. And I think in this day and age, that's much more sticky. There's much more traction to that than something that seems planned.
Yeah, I agree, and it's more real, authentic, all that fun stuff. And so, how do you keep the attention of some of those people? Like if you have like a story or kind of a tangent that's out there, how do you go on the journey that you want to go on without being too out there or without losing people?
Well, I'm sure I have lost people. I'm sure there are people, and in this day and age, it's good to be polarizing. And so I'm sure there are people that just can't stand that I go off on tangents, but other people, I remember I gave a talk to a bunch of CEOs, and they said, you were mesmerizing because we didn't know what you were going to say next. And I said to them, that makes two of us. and so the point is, I'm not for everyone, but if you can be articulate. One of my last living mentor was a big leadership guy from USC named Warren Bennis. He's synonymous with leadership. And he gave me this wonderful compliment. He said, Mark, you're an articulate intuitive. And I think when you're able to do that, when you can put into words things that people intuit, and you can put into words that help clarify it to them, that's really compelling. So I'll give you an example, and this is all spontaneous, because one of the things I talk about in my book on listening is the difference between listening to someone and listening into someone, and I'm going to demonstrate it with you because it's better to show than to tell. So you asked me, sort of some regular questions. So you asked me sort of a substantive question. So how do you, when you go on a tangent, how do you bring it back in? And I think I answered it somewhat, probably a B+ answer because it was spontaneous. I'd have to listen back to what I said. But if I'm listening into you, and tell me if this is different. If I'm listening into you, it's really important to you that you give value to your listeners. Even though this is almost the calling to you. And what's happening is you're getting better and better at identifying something that your listeners can understand, relate to, and use immediately to make their lives better and more successful. And hopefully we already accomplished that with the whoa, wow, yes, and we're just talking now. But I'm picking up, if I listen into you, that that's really important to you. And you're also on the lookout for people that would waste their time and waste your time. And how do you politely tell them, I'm sorry we couldn't broadcast your interview? So is any of that true?
Yeah, I'd say that's all true.
And when you listen back to this podcast, if you do, uh, when you said, I think it's all true, your tone changed slightly. What happened is you tried on what I said. There may have been a part of you that said, okay, let's see this guy. He thinks he can read my mind. And then when I did okay, I think what happened is you'll hear the tone of your voice. You say, wow, you had a wow. You said, wow, I think it's all true.
I feel like I'm being hypnotized here.
I know. You are now a chicken. No, but do you sense what I'm saying? That when you can listen into people, which reminds me of one of my favorite quotes. I have a few favorite quotes. And one of my favorite quotes comes from a British psychoanalyst named Wilfred Bion. And he said, the purest form of communication is to listen without memory or desire. To listen without memory or desire. And what he meant by that is when you listen with memory to another person, you have a past personal agenda that you're plugging them into. And when you listen with desire, you have a present or future personal agenda that you're plugging them into, but you're not listening to them. You're seeing where you can plug them in for you. And so in my book, Just Listen, one of the things I talk about is try to be a pal in your interactions with people. And PAL stands for purposeful, agendaless listening. Purposeful, agendaless listening. And I told you at the beginning with my Russian trip, my purpose was to show them that they could trust me and that I was there to serve them with absolutely nothing in it for me. And actually, what got them at hello is at the beginning, within a few minutes of starting, and this is all being translated. So they have earphones, and there's a wonderful translator. And one of the first things I said is, I was told by Americans not to smile in Russia because you people don't smile. But I realized the reason you don't smile is not because you're angry at me or unhappy. You don't smile because I haven't earned your trust yet. And you come from a country where foreigners have invaded you for centuries. So foreigners, unless you can trust them to not hurt you, not take advantage of you, and you can trust that they don't have an agenda, you're not going to smile. But I know that if I earn your trust and I give you some stuff that you can use today to make your life better, which is why you came here, you're not only going to smile, we're going to drink vodka afterwards, you're going to drink me under the table, and 3 of you are going to carry me back to my room at the Metropole. And they started laughing, and I said, oh, I got them at hello.
Awesome. So, like with that sort of like an opener or an icebreaker, what's your thought process there? Is it a matter of like thinking about what's important to them or what's on their mind or like where they're coming from and then meeting them where they're at and sort of future pacing them? Or how do you like develop something like that sort of joke to start off with?
Well, first of all, I've learned that I think I said at the beginning that when you get where people are coming from without their telling you, and you can articulate it, they're drawn to that. In fact, what they're thinking is, how did you know that about me? And if it doesn't look like you're selling them on anything, they become curious. I wonder what else you know about me. And so they were drawn in. And the point is, almost anyone can do this. If you're a marketer and you can't do this, you should probably go into operations or something, because you can usually figure out what's on your customer and client's mind. So I have a syndicated column that goes to 43 city business journals. So if you look up business journals, Goulston, Goulston, I give all my IP out. And there's one that's going to be coming out towards the end of this year for and I think it's called, let's see, Make 2018 the Year of User Experience. And so, and what I talk about is if you want to increase user experience, what you need to provide to them is something that's relevant to them, not something you love, but no one's going to buy, and then you have to hard sell your inventory. It needs to be relevant to them. It needs to be simple. People don't like stuff that's complicated. That's why Apple loves to simplify things, take away the buttons. It needs to be fun. People live quiet lives of desperation. That's why they're addicted to video games. It needs to be beautiful, because when you see something beautiful, it takes your breath away and it lasts forever. It needs to be socially redeeming if you want to capture millennials, because if you do something that's really hurting the world, they're not going to buy from you. And there's several other things, so that's just the preview. But and so you can put yourself in the other person's shoes. So I put myself in your shoes. And I said, geez, what's on Robert's mind about doing this podcast? Well, he's trying to grow his audience. He's trying to get more experienced and comfortable as a podcaster. He's offering an opportunity to build his own database with people that he finds interesting. He's wanting to get stuff for early businesses that will be valuable enough to them so that they'll be grateful to him. And if they're grateful to him, they may even reach out to him for some of their own marketing needs and help with their business that you can provide. And so I'm guessing that that's part of what's on your mind. And if we can do a podcast together here that delivers on that, we're cool. Is that any of that true?
Yeah, once again, it's all true. So I like your thought process a lot, as far as, yeah, like you put yourself in the other person's shoes and the audience's shoes, and then you figure out what's relevant, simple, fun, and beautiful for them. And then it sounds like there's a lot of just, once you have that ammunition or just the raw materials, and you can rearrange that and be like, well, am I gonna tell a story here, or am I gonna use this as a jumping off point? And so yeah, this is all pretty cool stuff. And this whole idea of listening more and then playing off of listening has been just really like the focus in my mind last couple of years, especially as I moved to this interview situation, because like what you said about listen but without memory or desire, like that makes a lot of sense, because I've definitely been, we've all been in those conversations, right? When you're trying to move the conversation along and they just keep kind of dragging the conversation back to subjects that you already talked about, or you're just trying to talk about the randomness and pick up on different people's things, and they're clearly driving you towards a destination, and it's very frustrating. And I've also been in this kind of situation where, like, I was speaking at Thailand once when there were a bunch of us speakers and we all had good information, but none of it really landed with the audience. And then there was one speaker who really half-assed it, barely did anything. His presentation ran short, but he showed a cool diagram and he showed some of the cool things that the people in the audience wanted to see. So even though he was light on content and light on everything and wasn't very good, what mattered was that he connected with the audience and he gave them what it was that they wanted to see and hear, as opposed to trying to stuff in a bunch of facts and figures, or as opposed to trying to be impressive or one up something. He just kept it simple and said, what do they want? Where are they coming from? Let me just give it to them.
Absolutely, yeah. And so the name of your podcast is, it's your name, right? Or is it Marketer of the Day? That's right?
Yep, just renamed it a few months ago, Marketer of the Day.
I like that. That fits in, because I love to come up with taglines for what people experience. So you're not going to use this, but I'll throw it out at you anyway. Because what you're, and I'm sure it's already taken, so I'll just throw it out and you won't use it. But a term that comes to mind is organic marketing. Marketing you can trust. Because what you're saying is when people come in with an agenda and they're trying to push it, it becomes sort of transparent. And when people feel pushed, they kind of push back. But if you can engage in a conversation that has sort of a life of its own, and it's being created on the fly, but it's offering value and good nuggets and tidbits, people are drawn to something that feels more organic than something that feels smarmy and, upselly, sort of digital marketing like.
Yeah, and definitely like I can do the hard sell, the marketing when I want to, but my own personal style is I like to be a little more casual, off the cuff, not so much rehearsed and polished and not scripted out.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Because what I'm learning in the world is people feel naive if they trust, but if you don't trust at all, it's not a great world. So you don't want to be fooled into trusting people, but if you trust nobody, it's not the best existence to have. And so I think people are always looking for something they can trust because it gets tiring to have your guard up.
Yeah, it gets pretty self-destructive if all you see around you is negativity and then you yourself become negative and who wants all that decay and rot and stuff, right?
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah.
Well, great. Well, I don't want to keep up too much of your time. We went a little over time so far, but as we're winding this down, is there any way to just encompass all the lessons we talked about here into something that'll really resonate and really hit home with people listening? Any way to kind of package it all up into a nice tidy bow here?
Yeah, what I would do is every time you go out, if you're listening, and you go into a conversation, a presentation, or anything, after you leave the conversation, the presentation, uh, ask yourself, if I was the other person, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much did they feel I understood them? So when you leave saying, okay, put yourself in the shoes of your customer, client, investor, someone you're dating, and you say, if I'm them and I were to ask them, how well do you felt I understood you and what was important to you? And come up with a number as them, and then say to yourself, don't beat yourself up, and then say to yourself, what could I have done differently so that I could leave the conversation? And here's another one of my favorite quotes from my mentor, Warren Bennis. He said, be more interested than interesting. Be more fascinated than fascinating. So you could ask yourself after the conversation, did I try more to be interesting than to be interested in them? And that's a struggle for me because, I wrote a book on listening, and of course you're giving me carte blanche here to talk about it because I wrote this and I've had these interesting experiences. But I can tell you when I'm not on a podcast or doing a presentation, I'm at my best when the other person walks away feeling, whoa, wow, yes, he really got me. He really got who I am. Wow. And people feel great with it.
And what I like about that is it's how well did they get me? How well did he understood me? It's not how much did he impress me or did he make me buy from him or anything like that. It was just keeping it simple. How well was I understood? I love it. And I also want to make sure that as we're getting to the end of this call, that everyone knows all about your books, your websites, anything else you want to plug here. So what do you have for us?
Okay, so you can find my 7 books on Amazon. So just go to amazon.com, Mark Goulston, Goulston. My speaking thought leadership, where they hire me around the world, is markgoulston.com. I have a consulting group called goulstongroup.com where we help companies, CEOs, people to be more compelling, how to help people create whoa, wow, yes, and other people. And also I hope people will tune into my podcast, Prison Letters with Dr. Mark Goulston. And just like with you, I hope they subscribe. I hope they will write reviews, if good, bad, or otherwise. Hope they're good. And also, you can find me at Twitter. I don't know, 460,000 followers at Mark Goulston. So I check and then at LinkedIn. I've got 10,000 people at LinkedIn. So, but I do, I hate to say it, next to Trump, I tweet a lot. Oh, here's something else. If you have a Twitter account, do you have a Twitter account?
Yes, I do. Robert Plank.
Robert Plank. I'll make sure I follow you. Something I've noticed. So I've got 460,000 followers. Whenever I mention anything, I could be promoting this. I may have even tweeted, "Oh, when you tell me when it's going to be up, I'll send a link." I get very little engagement. But what I'm discovering is when I send out surveys, sometimes I'll get 80,000 impressions, 3 or 4,000 engagements. But I'll ask questions that make people want to think about it. What was a recent survey? Something like, it might be something like, is it better for a leader to be inspiring or motivating, and explain why? So there'll be choices. And then people like these kind of things that make them think. Or another survey would be, here's another thing that you'll find in Just Listen. When you speak to people, how do they experience you? And then it's talking over people, talking at them, talking to them, talking with them. So when you do that, you can get amazing engagement. And then what I will often do to build a community is that I'm introducing the commenters, which are often many, to each other, thanking them, or sometimes people reach out looking for advice, and I could give them advice, but rather than being the big expert, I'll say to the other commenters, so-and-so asked this thing. Who has a good answer for that? So again, I think it's helping people. It's less important what you tell others, but what you help them to tell you that really matters to them.
Interesting. And I like that idea of, I like the idea, first of all, of asking one of those open-ended questions where there's really no wrong answer, or give them an either or something, but then also when the answers come in, sort of call on other people to chime in or give that answer. That's really powerful. And what you're making me think of is back when I first started building a list. I didn't build a list till 2005. And what really helped me as far as, sending out broadcast emails or making a follow-up sequence was to ask questions. And maybe some of them were just like yes or no questions, or questions to get them thinking, but just, short emails with questions about would eventually, lead up to whatever solution I was providing. But instead of just sending out some information or some facts and figures, by asking them the questions, by opening up them to be able to do that, made it a lot more responsive and made it easier for me to crank those out. And then something else that comes to mind is when I first started a blog, and this was like 2008 or something, when I made a blog, I had trouble getting blog comments. And nowadays the problem's even worse because everyone's on Facebook, but I was having trouble getting blog comments, and then I began putting out blog posts that always ended with a question. So I'd say a bunch of stuff, but then ended with a question to encourage those blog comments, which is what's a simple tweak. But by doing that, I was able to get tons more comments, as opposed to just saying, here's some advice, here's some data, go and give me your response to it. So it's almost like a question has to be answered. So, you're getting all kinds of gears turning, all kinds of light bulbs turning on as far as listening to people, asking questions, and not just being that person that just spews out a bunch of stuff. So I want to make sure that everyone knows where to go and to find you. So number one, go to Amazon and search for Mark Goulston. You can see his books there, including the Just Listen book. And then number two, go to markgoulston.com. Number three, we said goulstongroup.com, where you can find out how to be more compelling with whoa, wow, and yes. And then number five, Twitter at Mark Goulston. And then number six, LinkedIn, Mark Goulston. And just make sure to go to all those places and connect with him any which way that you can. So that way you get on his radar, he gets on your radar, so that when Mark asks those different survey questions, or he has helpful advice or things like that, now you'll be dialed in on all possible channels of social media. Oh yeah, and then I can't believe we also forgot number four in there was that podcast, the Prison Letters with Dr. Mark. So make sure that you go to all those places right now and subscribe every which way, so that way you know about his books, you know about his updates, you know about his posts, you know about everything that's going on. So make sure to do that, and it all starts by going to Amazon and checking out Dr. Mark Goulston. So anything to add? I know we kind of went long here, but any just like final thoughts or anything to put a button on our conversation today?
Well, I have another tip that I've never given before. So can I give you that?
Perfect.
I don't know.
I got an exclusive. I love it.
So, because when you mention, and I'm going to change some things now, because see, when you put out a survey, People can click one, two, or three, agree, disagree. I always put down other, please explain. Uh, if you can ask a question like in one sentence, then ask the question. When people give you a sentence, they have more investment in you because they're giving you a sentence as opposed to clicking a button. And something that I also teach salespeople, and when they're in conversation with customers, when people say something to you, when a customer says something to you, notice four things. Notice hyperbole, like horrendous, awful, amazing. Notice inflection. We need to do this because this is important. Notice adjectives and adverbs because all of those reveal emotional juice. So when someone writes a comment in a sentence and they say something, this would be so amazing if, or this is so horrendous, if you respond then by saying, say more about the horrendous, say more about so amazing. Because when you listen to people and identify those emotional charged words, what they don't expect you to do is tell them to give you even more emotion. And the more that you can get them to be expressing themselves deeper, the less of a commodity you are because they're feeling, wow, he's really understanding me.
That's super fantastic. I'm totally going to steal that in future interviews because I hadn't thought about that. I thought about having the conversation and unpacking a point someone made or unpacking, some piece of information. But as far as going deeper into what made them angry or made them frustrated or fearful, that's super great. So I'm definitely going to steal that and use it in other interviews, and I'll let you know how it goes.
Yeah, I would use the word, instead of what made you feel that way, that's I think it's cleaner to say more about just we use their words, say more about the angry thing, or say more about the amazing, because that's cleaner. If you say, well, what made you angry? You run the risk of their saying, well, I didn't tell you something made me angry. I just said I was angry. So I think say more is cleaner.
Say more about the anger. Perfect.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I will let you know, and everyone else, make sure that you go to all of Mark's great websites, markgoulston.com, Mark Goulston on Amazon, and all those other places, and we'll see you there at markgoulston.com. And thanks so much, Dr. Mark, for stopping by and giving us lots of great stuff to go running with.
Well, go run with it, Robert. Thank you for helping. Thank you for unleashing me and letting me, run wherever I had to go.
Thanks for listening to today's program. Start from the beginning or view past episodes at marketeroftheday.com/